I had always believed that Egypt hid far more than the history books dared to admit. Behind every eroded temple, behind every precisely aligned stone, behind every hieroglyph that seemed to tell a complete story, there was a silence, an organized silence, too deliberate to be accidental, a silence that concealed more than ruins, something older than the pyramids themselves. But I never imagined that everything would begin with an old wooden box left anonymously at my door. The box was tied with worn cords and covered in a thin layer of dust, as if it had traveled across entire deserts before reaching me. Inside, wrapped in a coarse cloth, I found a fragment of black stone. When I touched it, I felt a strange cold, not thermal, but alive, as if the material had been preserved away from heat, away from time, away from the world itself. But what truly froze me was the carved symbol. 3 wavy lines converging into a central spiral. Bit. It didn't belong to any known system. Not Egyptian, not Sumerian, not Neolithic. I had seen it only once before, on a pre-dynastic tablet recovered in Saqqara, whose authenticity many archaeologists doubted because its iconography matched no known culture. It was simply too ancient. And beneath the spiral, a single vertical line, a signature, a code, a presence. Inside the box there was also a small piece of paper, written in Old Arabic. The handwriting shaky but deliberate. What you seek is not in the pyramids. It is beneath them, in the city erased from history. My pulse quickened. City. The word rattled inside my mind like a silent earthquake. For years I had heard rumors, Bedouins whispering about sealed passages, restorers mentioning strange breaths beneath the sand, military officers closing areas without explanation, explorers claiming to have seen chambers far older than the pyramids. But a city, entirely hidden, entirely forbidden, that surpassed every theory. I flew to Egypt on an improvised ticket, telling no colleagues or institutions. I didn't want interference nor questions. My contact in Giza, Abdul Rahman, a retired restorer with more scars than years of service, greeted me with a mix of sorrow and warning. As soon as he closed the door behind us, he lowered his voice. "You received the stone, didn't you?" I nodded. "Then you can't go back now." He led me to a small room lit by a kerosene lamp. There, he unfolded an old hand-drawn map, the blue ink oddly vibrant for its age. At first glance, it looked like a subterranean diagram. At second glance, I no longer knew what it was. There were no tombs, no traditional Egyptian corridors, no burial chambers. There were concentric circles, interwoven tunnels like nerves, curved structures, zones marked with symbols I'd never seen. And in the center, carefully written, the Forbidden City. "This exists beneath the plateau," Abdul whispered, "and some would kill to keep it hidden." I asked how he'd gotten the map. His eyes drifted into an invisible distance. "Government archaeologist gave it to me 40 years ago," he said. He vanished soon after. The map didn't match any modern scans of Giza's underground. It wasn't a forgery. It was something older, far older. As if it described a system buried long before the pyramids were conceived. "This isn't Egyptian," I said. "No," Abdul replied. "It's much older." He pointed to a location that supposedly marked the entrance. It didn't appear on any archaeological chart, but it had appeared in restoration reports from the 1950s, before being redacted in thick black ink. We left before sunrise. We avoided the tourist zones, following routes only veteran restorers knew. After crossing silent dunes, we reached a fenced-off area. Half buried in the sand lay an enormous slab, smooth and polished like dark glass. and there, at its center, was the spiral. I knelt, ran my fingers along the symbol, and the stone vibrated, not trembled, responded, as if it recognized me. Abdul stepped back immediately. "It's awake," he whispered. I pulled out my instruments. Thermal sensor, perfectly uniform temperature, impossible under the desert sun. The magnetometer, weak but steady field, like a heartbeat. Ground-penetrating radar, perfect geometric cavity beneath the slab. It wasn't a tomb, not a chamber, a seal. I placed both hands over the spiral. The vibration intensified. A soft blue glow seeped between my fingers. The sand shifted aside as though pushed by an invisible force. And then the slab descended. It didn't tilt, slide, or grind. It lowered vertically smooth, weightless, as if gravity had surrendered. A wave of cold air surged upward, not stale like in ancient tombs, clean, sterile, as though untouched by time. A corridor appeared beneath us, wide, dark, impossibly perfect. The walls were smooth, jointless, black, with a faint translucence. Tiny pulses of blue light drifted inside them, like trapped stars. I descended the first step. My foot made no sound. The corridor absorbed everything in architecture built for silence. We walked several meters until the passage opened, and I saw it, the city. Not human, not ruin, not temple. A colossal subterranean expanse, alive with geometric shadows, Tau rising from darkness. Arched bridges linking suspended platforms, walls pulsing with internal light, and a vastness that defied logic, hidden beneath Giza for ages without a trace. Abdul murmured, breathless, This cannot be human," and I knew instantly this city was not abandoned, not destroyed, not dead. It was asleep, sleeping beneath modern Egypt, sleeping beneath recorded history, sleeping, waiting for someone. And I, by touching the spiral, had opened its eyes. The slab was not merely a buried door. It was a threshold, a deliberate boundary between the world we know and a domain that had remained concealed with unnerving success for millennia. When the massive stone finished lowering itself into the depths, the air that escaped the passage below was not the stale, stagnant odor of ancient tombs. It was clean, cold, sterile, as if that corridor had been sealed not by time, but by intention. Abdul swallowed hard, shaking. He was not a man who frightened easily. He had restored temples, tombs, and forgotten shrines for decades. He had seen everything, except this. "Don't go down there," he whispered, though even he knew the plea was futile. I didn't answer. The decision had been made the moment I felt the spiral vibrate beneath my hands. I descended the first step. The sound vanished instantly, not echoed, not muffled, absorbed. Every footstep dissolved into a deeper silence, as though the corridor devoured vibration itself. It felt engineered for quiet, for observation. The walls were black and smooth, faintly translucent. Inside them, tiny pulses of blue light drifted like veins carrying energy. This was not decoration. This was function. When I touched the wall lightly, a pulse responded, subtle, rhythmic. The city was connected to itself, to the seal, to us. We walked 20 meters until the corridor widened into a natural balcony. Shining my light ahead, I realized the beam couldn't pierce the depth of the chamber below. A cavern, a colossal artificial cavern, and within it, the city. From our elevated position, I could see shapes emerging from the living darkness, massive curved pillars, suspended platforms, broad ramps bending like living architecture. Nothing adhered to right angles. Nothing was symmetrical in a human sense. Every structure flowed like bone or coral grown over eons. This was not constructed. It was cultivated. A civilization had shaped matter the way living organisms shape tissue. Abdul let out a broken, trembling whisper. "This is not man-made." And he was right. We descended along a sweeping ramp whose surface shifted subtly beneath our feet, adapting its texture as we walked, as though it sensed our weight. There, when we reached the city floor, I noticed something astonishing. The ground was made of giant hexagonal plates, each resonating softly with a vibration felt through the bones rather than the ears. We were walking on a lattice of energy, not stone. The city was alive, dormant, yes, but alive. As we moved forward, the blue lights embedded in the walls brightened in response, tracking our position like 1,000 silent eyes. "Do you feel that?" I asked. Abdul nodded, gripping his lantern, following us. "Whatever it is, it wasn't a presence." "Not exactly. It was a system, a consciousness distributed across architecture. It observed, it evaluated, it remembered." Ahead of us, the central avenue opened into a great expanse framed by 3 towering structures. They were massive, smooth, and tapered upward like elongated obelisks, yet unlike anything Egyptian. No entrances, no carvings, no erosion. Their surfaces were impossibly perfect. But what unsettled me most was the vibration. Each tower pulsed with a slightly different frequency. They were harmonizing, as though tuning themselves. Then suddenly, the tower to our left changed color. The soft blue glow turned into deep gold. Not reflected light generated light. Abdul staggered backward. "It's activating," he cried. The vibration intensified. The hexagonal plates on the floor pulsed in waves. The air thickened with an invisible charge. The object in my pocket, the cylinder, began to throb violently, as if reacting to the awakening around us. With trembling hands I removed it. The city reacted instantly. The blue light shifted to a brilliant, crystalline white. The plates beneath us hummed in perfect unison. The 3 towers bent their resonance toward the cylinder, harmonizing like instruments tuning to a master frequency. Abdul dropped to his knees, covering his ears. The hum was not loud, but it penetrated bone and thought. I alone remained standing, not from strength, but because something was holding me up. Something in the city had locked onto me. The cylinder pulsed. The city pulsed back, like 2 halves of a signal reconnecting after thousands of years. "The city is reading you," Abdul gasped. It's choosing you." I couldn't speak, not from fear, but from certainty. The city knew me. It didn't see me as an intruder. It saw me as a key. Compelled by something deeper than reason, I stepped forward. The towers responded. The harmonic frequencies shifted upward. A spiral of light unfurled across the floor, pointing to a raised platform, a head-up platform with an intricate pedestal at its center. The pedestal wasn't ornamental. It wasn't ceremonial. It was an interface. Every instinct in me screamed that this was the place where the cylinder belonged, not in a museum, not in a lab. Here, I stepped onto the platform. The air thickened like liquid light. As I approached the pedestal, the hum resolved into clarity, into a meaning, not a sound. Continue. My breath caught. The cylinder vibrated like a living heart, and without hesitation, or perhaps without choice, I placed it into the pedestal. The reaction was instant. A shockwave of white-gold light shot across the city. The towers ignited. The cavern ceiling flickered as if awakening stars within its structure. The floor beneath us resonated, sending ripples of energy outward. And then a form emerged. Not walking, not forming from smoke, manifesting. A tall, humanoid silhouette composed of fractal light appeared before me. It had no face, yet I felt its gaze pierce through my mind. Its presence was not spectral, not technological. It was memory made visible. And inside my mind, meaning crystallized, identity accepted. I reeled. Abdul whimpered behind me. The figure turned slightly toward him. Secondary entity, irrelevant. Then back to me. The hum rose in pitch. Light spiraled upward around us. The towers vibrated as if preparing for something monumental, and the next message struck like a silent hammer. Return protocol initiated. Cold spread through my spine. The city wasn't waking up to share secrets. It wasn't illuminating its history. It wasn't greeting explorers. It was rebooting, reactivating, reawakening. Preparing for what? Or for whom? The figure of light began to dissolve, its last fragments drifting upward like sparks, but one final meaning imprinted itself into my mind. The return begins with you. My knees nearly buckled. Not from terror, but from comprehension. This city wasn't the remains of an ancient civilization. It was a beacon, a signal, a dormant system awaiting the correct key. And I, through accident or fate, had turned it on. The first thing that struck me as we descended into the heart of the city was not its scale, nor its impossible architecture, nor even the lights pulsing from deep within its walls. It was the silence. A silence so perfect it felt engineered. A silence not of absence, but of intention. Every step we took dissolved instantly. No echon, no resonance, no physical trace of sound. It was as though the city itself consumed every vibration in order to remain in a state of controlled stillness. The light that guided us came from within the walls, soft blue pulses drifting like microscopic fish beneath black crystal. It wasn't illumination in the normal sense. It was circulation, as if the city were pumping light the way a body pumps blood. Abdul walked behind me, his lantern trembling in his grasp. He had restored tombs, pyramids, shrines. He had touched structures older than any living language. But this was something else entirely. This place, he whispered, should not exist. He was right. Nothing about the city resembled ruins. This was not a forgotten settlement, not a ceremonial chamber, not a burial complex. It was precise, intact, preserved, not decayed dormant, as though someone, at some time long forgotten, had deliberately put it to sleep. We stepped onto a massive concourse lined with towering structures whose surfaces flowed like molten stone frozen in time. Long, spiraling columns curved overhead, bridges arched across black chasms. Suspended platforms hung motionless in the air, waiting, yes, waiting. The entire city felt like a machine paused mid-breath. The cylinder in my hand pulsed in rhythm with the lights around us. Abdul noticed, "That thing, it's syncing with this place," he murmured, fear overwhelming his voice. I didn't answer because I knew. I felt it. The city was recognizing it, recognizing me. We approached a narrow platform extending over an abyss. The moment my foot touched it, the entire bridge lit up under my steps, illuminating itself segment by segment, like a neural pathway firing impulses. Not for Abdul, only for me. A sense of inevitability settled in my chest. The path guided us directly to a vast central plaza. There, towering above everything else, stood the structure I had glimpsed only faintly from afar now, fully revealed. The core, a massive assembly of concentric rings rotating in opposite directions, glowing with shifting bands of blue and gold. The rings were enormously taller than the Great Pyramid and moved without friction, guided by forces I could neither see nor understand. The air here was thick, almost gelatinous, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. Abdul stopped several meters behind me. I can't get any closer," he whispered. But I was already being pulled forward. The core hummed. The patterns of light spiraled inward. The platform vibrated beneath my feet. At the center of the rings stood the pedestal. Not a throne, not an altar, a terminal, a perfect receptacle for the cylinder. I knew this instinctively, not from reasoning, but from something older, something resonating inside my mind. A wordless impulse pressed itself into my thoughts. Continue. The cylinder throbbed in my palm. My heart raced. My mind screamed no, but my body stepped closer. As I ascended the steps to the pedestal, the rings responded. Their rotations synchronized. The hum deepened. A column of white-blue light erupted from the pedestal into the air, like breath escaping a giant creature. I placed the cylinder into the socket at the pedestal's center. It didn't click into place. It merged like two pieces of liquid metal forming one. The result was immediate. Light shot outward in ripples. The entire plaza illuminated. The city awoke, not loudly, not violently, but with a trembling anticipation like the intake of a colossal breath. Then it appeared. A figure, not made of flesh, not made of stone, not of machine. A being of structured light, fractal in every direction, humanoid in silhouette and yet unmistakably alien. It did not move toward me. It did not gesture. It simply existed, manifesting like a memory. And then the pressure began, a weight inside my skull, not painful, but overwhelming. Communication without sound, meaning hit me all at once. Identity accepted. I staggered backward. The figure turned slightly toward Abdul. Secondary presence, non-essential, Abdul gasped, horrified. The rings accelerated. Sparks of light cascaded upward. The air thickened until it felt like we were underwater. Then the second message formed in my mind. System reactivation sequence engaged. My blood froze. The city wasn't awakening for us. It was restarting, rebooting something far older than humanity's recorded history. The figure's edges flickered as if dissolving. One final message seared into my consciousness. The return begins with you. And then the figure vanished, shattering into particles of light that drifted upward like embers. The hum subsided. The rings slowed. The city went still. But something had changed. Not in the city, in me. A strange familiarity pulsed inside my chest, as though the mechanism had implanted a seed of knowledge, a trigger, a code. Abdul's voice trembled behind me. "Whatever this place is," he said, "you shouldn't have activated it." I knew he was right, but it was too late. The city had used me as a key. The protocol had begun, and whatever was returning, it wasn't human. The core was still vibrating when the fractal figure dissolved into drifting embers of light, returning to whatever system had summoned it. The pedestal glowed, the concentric rings spun faster, and the air itself felt charged, thick, luminous, aware. It wasn't the awakening of a machine. It was the controlled inhalation of something vast, something ancient, something designed for a purpose we had just reactivated. The plaza grew brighter, revealing structures that had hidden in the tall towers opened like mechanical flowers, exposing inner chambers that pulsed with threads of light. Curved walls came alive with shifting patterns, the glow flowing like data through arteries. The city, silent for millennia, was now Alartit's attention fixed on us. Abdul staggered back, his voice trembling. "What have you done?" "Nothing deliberately," I said, but even I knew how hollow that sounded. "This place, it's reacting to you," he insisted, pointing toward the pedestal. "It's not built for us. Look how it's watching." He was right. As I exhaled, the lights shifted. As I moved, walls brightened. As the cylinder merged with the pedestal, the towers adjusted their pulses. The city wasn't just awake, it was synchronizing with me. I stepped onto the platform surrounding the pedestal. As my hand brushed its edge, a surge of mental pressure filled my skull-knot pain. Not intrusion, but an overwhelming download of pure comprehension. A message without language. Catalyst identified. I gasped. The lines of light running across the pedestal expanded, branching outward like veins, spreading across the plaza, climbing the towers, racing toward the cavern ceiling. A dome of faint luminosity appeared above USA Barrier, a screen, a projection surface. I couldn't tell. Then a deep resonance began, not sound, but vibration, felt in bone and blood. Abdul collapsed to his knees, covering his ears though nothing audible was present. "Make it stop," he cried. "I beg you, stop it." But I couldn't stop anything. The protocol had already passed the point of return. The city was obeying a command older than its own architecture. Something beneath the pedestal was downloading, uploading, preparing. The fractal figure had not been a guardian. It had been an introduction. The true system was everywhere around us, and it had awakened the moment the cylinder fused with the core. I stepped carefully off the platform. The moment my foot touched the plaza, paths lit up, literally tracing lines in the floor that stretched away into deeper corridors. The city was guiding me, and I followed. Abdul grabbed my sleeve desperately. "Please," he whispered, "don't go where it wants you to go. This is not discovery. This is the beginning of something." "I know," I said quietly. The corridor ahead pulsed with soft, slow light. It didn't flicker, it breathed. As I walked, the floor's hexagonal plates shifted hue beneath my feet in subtle waves, adjusting to my steps. This wasn't a hallway, it was an artery. After several minutes, we reached a semicircular chamber. Its walls were smooth crystal, layered with shifting fractal patterns. At first they looked decorative, but then the patterns moved, and the movement formed shapes, then scenes, then memory. I froze. The crystalline walls were showing a Rekodan unbroken reel of something this civilization had preserved. Silhouettes of tall, elegant beings walked through the still-living city. They weren't mechanical projections, they were vivid, volumetric memory. They moved with an organic precision, interacting with the architecture through gestures and harmonics. The city didn't just house them, responded to them like an extension of their bodies. They weren't builders using tools. The city was their tool. Then the scene shifted. Storms, skies collapsing, oceans devouring land. A planet in upheaval. Not war, not disease. A catastrophe at scale, geological, astronomical, environmental. Their world was failing, and the city was their refuge, not their capital. The chamber was an ark, a data vault, a living archive, a mechanism for rebuilding after inevitable collapse. Then the final scenes came. The beings gathered in the core. One held the cylinder identical to mine. Another traced its hand along the spiral symbol, activating the seal. Light faded. Layers closed. The city sank into engineered dormancy. And just before total darkness, a hand placed the cylinder into a chamber, sealed with a frequency. The vision ended. The crystal dimmed. I felt hollow. Abdul just whispered. It was their last act, but I knew it wasn't a farewell. It was preparation. The city had not been constructed to be found. It had been constructed to wake up again. Not for humans, for them. Abdul, I said, voice cracking, this wasn't meant for us. He nodded weakly. No, but now it's too late. Then came the final blow. Not a sound, not a vision, a presence. A meaning burned itself into my mind. The sequence cannot be stopped. A chill flooded my body. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement of fact. The return protocol, whatever that meant, was no longer dormant. We had triggered the beginning. The lights in the chamber dimmed. Paths of illumination faded, one by one. The city was withdrawing, settling, stabilizing like a giant preparing to rest again, but only temporarily. We walked back along the corridor in silence. The floor no longer shifted under our feet. The walls no longer pulsed. The towers in the distance had closed. The core's rings slowed. The pedestal was dark. The city had gone still. But it was no longer asleep. It was waiting. When we reached the surface, the desert air struck my face with blinding heat. The sky was calm. The world above remained completely unaware. The slab had resealed itself perfectly. No trace of entry, no hint of disturbance. But the protocol was active. For days afterward, my mind replayed the messages. Every vibration, every pulse, every pattern of light. Not as memories, but as something alive in me. I realized something dreadful. The city had not awakened for itself. It had awakened through me. I had become part of the mechanism. I should have reported everything immediately. I should have told the scientific community, the authorities, anyone. But the truth was as massive as the city itself. Humanity is not ready. Not for this. Not for what lies beneath Egypt. Not for what is returning. So I made my decision. A heavy one. A necessary one. I would document everything, but I would seal the full account. Not to hide it. To protect us, kid. Because the forbidden city beneath Egypt is not a myth. Not a ruin. Not a forgotten legacy. It is a mechanism. A beacon. A memory alive in stone and light. And it has already begun to awaken. Not in the city, but in me. When we left the chamber of the temporal map behind, a strange quietness settled over me, not the quiet of relief, but the quiet of realization. Something inside me had shifted, subtly but permanently. The city was no longer a place I had entered. It was a place that had entered me. The corridor we walked through pulsed faintly with slow, steady light. The vibrations beneath my feet had diminished. The walls no longer responded to my presence. The city, now stabilized, seemed to have paused its awakening, not cancelled it, not reversed it, simply paused, as though waiting for a future cue. Abdul walked beside me, silent. He wasn't trembling anymore. His fear had turned into resignation. He knew we both knew. We had crossed a threshold no human was meant to cross. At the end of the corridor we reached a circular chamber. Its walls were smooth and crystalline, layered with shifting fractal patterns. From afar they looked decorative. Up close they were alive. As I approached, the fractals reorganized themselves. They twisted, they aligned, and suddenly they revealed not patterns, but memory. Not a projection, not an image. A record, clear, radiant, unmistakably alive. Tall, elegant beings moved through the city in its prime. Their bodies glowed faintly, as if composed of structured luminescence. They didn't carry tools. They didn't manipulate objects. Instead, the city responded to their gestures and movements. Walls rearranged themselves. Light pulsed in harmonic waves. Pathways formed beneath their steps. The city wasn't their creation. It was their extension. Then the scene shifted. A world dying. Storms swallowing entire horizons. Tides devouring ancient coastlines. Skies splitting with violent energies. Structures collapsing beneath forces no civilization could survive. And through it all, those luminous beings remained calm, not fearful, but resigned. The next record showed them inside the city, gathered around the core. The cylinder, my cylinder, was placed into a chamber that sealed itself with geometric precision. One figure traced the spiral symbol with its hand, activating a sequence. The city darkened, the lights dimmed. One by one, layers of architecture closed like petals. The entire subterranean structure folded inward, sealing itself away. And then total silence. The chamber faded to black. The memory ended. I stood there, unable to breathe. Abdul's voice was barely audible behind me. It was their last refuge. But even that wasn't accurate. This wasn't a deathbed. It was a preparation. The city had been built with one purpose: to survive its makers. Not as a museum, not as a monument, Kat, but as a mechanism awaiting a trigger. I turned to Abdul. "This wasn't meant for archaeologists," I whispered. "It wasn't meant to be discovered." He nodded slowly. "It was meant to wake up again." The weight of that truth settled on us like desert stone. Then something happened, something quiet, internal, impossible to describe. Not a voice, not a vision, but a kind of mental imprint, a pressure that came directly from the pedestal, still humming faintly in the distance. A message without sound. The sequence cannot be stopped. The words didn't echo. They didn't fade. They stayed. The return protocol, whatever it referred to, had begun. Not explosively, not violently, but with the quiet certainty of a cycle resuming after thousands of years. The chamber's light dimmed. The walls stopped shifting. The breathing glow in the floor stilled. The city was not shutting down. It was moving to the next phase. We retraced our steps. The corridors no longer shifted beneath our feet. The towers remained closed. The bridges were inert. The core's rings slowed until they became motionless circles of faint light. The forbidden city was no longer dormant. But it was no longer active either. It was waiting. The climb to the surface felt heavier than descending ever had. The weight wasn't in my limbs, but in my mind, a crushing awareness. We had irreversibly triggered something. When we emerged into the open air, the desert evening struck me like a physical blow. The sun hovered low, casting long shadows across the dunes. Everything above looked untouched, unchanged. The slab had resealed itself perfectly. No crack, no seam, no hint of what lay beneath. And yet, I felt it, a presence, a hum beneath the sand, steady, patient, inevitable. For the next several days, the world above continued exactly as it always had. People walked, markets bustled, the Nile flowed, but the present moved forward, oblivious to the ancient mechanism stirring below. But I couldn't think clearly. The messages repeated themselves in my mind, not as memories, but as directives imprinted into my consciousness. Catalyst identified. Reactivation sequence engaged. The return begins with you. The sequence cannot be stopped. Something had changed inside me. I could feel it not as a physical shift, but as a new resonance, as though my mind had been tuned to a frequency the city recognized. And with that understanding came a responsibility I had never expected to bear. I knew I could not reveal everything, not to universities, not to governments, not to the world, not yet. Humanity wasn't ready, not for the truth, not for the implications, not for whatever return meant. But I could not erase what I had learned. I could not pretend it hadn't happened. So I made my decision. I began writing this record slowly, carefully, deliberately, not as a public document, but as a sealed account for a future generation, a future crisis, a future awakening, for those who will one day need to understand what lies beneath the sands. The Forbidden City beneath Egypt is not legend. It is not architecture. It is not human. It is a mechanism, a memory, a signal, a beacon waiting for its next cycle, and now it is active. The world above remains blissfully unaware. But the return has already begun, not in the city, but in me.